Big Goodwin here, and eventually we will like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff, help promote and rank up my channel. So I'm reviewing Stargirl, Episode 7, Season 1. The logline for this one is, as Pat teaches Courtney, Yolanda, Beth, and Rick the importance of teamwork, the ISA converge to figure out who is trying to take them down. Everywhere as the school prepares for homecoming. Now, it's not too... I was actually a bit disappointed by this episode, but I'm going to go ahead and break this down into 3 acts. Let you know the best stuff up front, and then I'll kind of let you know anything that just didn't set so well, or didn't really didn't set well with me, particularly, my own personal bias. And then I'll let you know everything that was flawed in the storytelling. So the best stuff really in this episode, the opening montage that focuses on each member of the new JSA was pretty good and pretty well executed. Early joke in there from Mike about making sure Courtney doesn't kill everybody was pretty funny in itself, and it was very well played with the way that Pat and Courtney convinced them that they were talking about driving. She was asking for hands-on experience, and he was saying that she needed to be educated. It was just very well covering covering themselves. That they did a great job at that. And the action in this episode is particularly superior. It's very well choreographed. Very visually too. It's just an interesting thing to see happen. And what happens to Courtney, I say, is well deserved. This is one of the few episodes where I don't actually like Courtney's attitude. But Pat wanting to teach the new guys the ropes, I thought that was very cool. He built this little training ground for them. And while most of them appreciated it, Courtney didn't. But their attitudes towards Pat after the previous episode are very excellent. I really like how they... the only thing that didn't... Well, I'll get into that later. But their attitudes seem to be where they should be at in terms of story and narrative and how we're driving it forward. I really appreciated them also kind of defending Pat with Courtney's behavior. And this episode it really elaborates on Shiv, the high school mean girl. It really elaborates on her and brings more substance to the character than there was before. It shows you that she isn't just a cliche. This is full on her. And it shines light on some of her history through dialogue. We don't see it, but we know well enough, and we can suspect that she is responsible for whatever happened to her mother. The Dragon King, the dungeon, the sets, everything looks superior. As always here in Stargirl, none of the CW shows can even compare to Stargirl and the production on this one. But I felt like we got some really good moments, some very lighthearted comedic moments that were pretty funny in themselves. And the heroes being on board, the action was great. But a few things, let's just move into my own personal bias here. A few things about this episode. I really don't like Courtney's attitude this episode. I do have to give them props before we get too much into this, with the way that they mirrored Courtney and Pat butting heads and Courtney's obnoxious attitude, and the way they mirrored that with Shiv and her father, her obnoxious attitude towards him, her over-eagerness to want to just... And she's not even interested in high school, really. She's more interested in just joining up with the ISA, and to find out that she knows all about. She's the one child that actually knows all about what her villain parents are up to, and what the overall villain parents are up to. Um, and we got another really nice moment from Icicle and his son that's really great. And that's the way you do a villain, do a great villain. You you make them really dark, but you also give them these shining moments of humanity. And they really dropped the ball with Shiv in this one. They really dropped the ball with her character in this one. Because she's just so obnoxious and unlikable. Sydney is just. But let's talk about my own personal bias with this episode. I thought it was strange. Well, I don't know if this is a personal bias or if this is just a, a flaw in the story. I don't really think it can be stated as a flaw in the story. That my personal bias. It doesn't set well with me when Beth's parents just kind of rush in on her in the bathroom when they've just barely knocked and they're like, "Oh, are you okay?" She's in the bathroom, man. You don't walk in on your daughter. Both parents walking in on their daughter in the bathroom, asking for lunch. This is weird. And when I talked about Icicle being the way you do a villain, it's not really a flaw in the story itself. That it is a flaw if you want us to like this character Sydney at all, to make her just so obnoxious and horrible towards people like her stepmom, even though we know her stepmom likely isn't a real person. It's just some kind of drone that that her father made. I'm not 100% sure on that, but with the way she behaved towards Sydney, just the way Sydney behaved towards her and everybody else in this episode, there's no redeemable qualities at all in this character. With the way she treats her boyfriend Henry, it's such a burden, and we find out that it actually is a burden for her. She just wants to dump him, but her father won't let her, and the whole reason is because he's Brainwave's son, and they're waiting for him to come in his own powers. And I really did actually like the stuff that we're doing with Henry. I thought that was great. I thought that was excellent. And this did do a great job of mirroring the hero episodes where we're building up the hero characters. This one really did a good job of building up the younger villain characters. And I don't know for sure if they're going to make Brainwave's son a villain, if they're going to make Henry a villain. I think they would like to keep him a hero. I'd like to build him up and make him a hero, go in the opposite direction. But also the janitor, that was really great stuff in here. They finally shed light on him, and I don't know if he's supposed to be, but I suspect he is a shining light. But back to my personal bias, like I was saying, the way you make a villain, Sydney is really unlikable. You make a villain that people love to hate. With Sydney, it just feels so obnoxious and being hammered over the head by this character's behavior is just so self-entitled and egotistical. And just really unlikable. Meanwhile, you have a villain like Icicle, who can be incredibly cold and callous and murder somebody's son 1 minute just to make an example, and then have this really beautiful moment with his own son where they're mourning the loss of his mother, celebrating the anniversary or whatever in her absence, like celebrating her birthday in her absence. You can have really beautiful stuff like that. Or you can have a villain like Brainwave, who's just incredibly intimidating and incredibly powerful, and that's enough. You don't have to give him this real human side. You don't have to give a villain character a real human side to make a great villain, as they did with Brainwave. They showed he was incredibly powerful and intimidating, and it was a bit eerie. But with Sydney, it's just so obnoxious and in your face. So I'm not a fan of her as a villain, or the execution on it. And yeah, they do mention that, she didn't become like that until her mother died, but still, that's just, she just became, a one-dimensional, flat-out evil evil person, and there's no redeemable qualities to her, the way she's written so far. So I don't like that. And Courtney's attitude in this episode is this one. Let's just jump into Act 3, because Courtney's attitude in this episode, I really think it's a flaw in the narrative. Because last episode, Act 3 is where I just talk about the worst stuff. So, Courtney's attitude this episode is really obnoxious and egotistical, really matched Sydney's. So it was really hard to see both of these girls just so heavily focused on in this episode, and they're both just being really horrible and egotistical, and you want them both to get the smackdown. And Courtney does get the smackdown. She gets it pretty bad. Yeah. So it just doesn't match up for me. With the way the last episode ended, she was all, as she finally learned her lesson. She finally got Pat what was saying, because she experienced it for herself from her own team. But now it's just like she's already forgotten all that, and she just wants to go back into rushing in, being foolish, and it just doesn't work that way. It just feels like she's bipolar now. So that didn't set well with me. And another thing is, when she finally does learn her lesson, and she is down for the count, when Pat comes rushing to her aid, yelling her name, I'm not exactly sure if Sydney was going to recognize who Courtney is, that Courtney is Stargirl. I'm not exactly sure if she was able to recognize it or not at a certain point through the fight. But she definitely does now that Pat came running yelling her name instead of Stargirl. So, if the beans aren't spilled, if her identity isn't out of the bag now, then that's going to be another problem in the narrative. But her identity definitely has to be out of the bag now. And maybe it isn't. It is a flaw in the character for him to be so concerned with their safety and all that, and then just come running, yelling her name. But I really don't have much else to say that's negative about this episode. Just the attitude of the Sydney and Courtney, and they got major focus. I really liked Mike for the first time in this episode. He made some good points, he said some stuff that made him more likable. I like how the team is now on Pat's side, and they want to learn, they want to train, so they don't get defeated again. And it just felt really off that it was like Courtney learned nothing. I think in the last episode she had learned her lesson. This episode we got to repeat that lesson. And then the whole them walking in on their daughter in the bathroom, that was just kind of off-putting for me. And just the incredible obnoxious behavior of Sydney and Courtney in this episode was a bit hard to make either one of them likable to any degree. But Shining Knight, if that's him, if the janitor is actually Shining Knight, that's going to be incredibly awesome. And I look forward to that being elaborated on. I'd probably only give this episode a 6 out of 10 though. The action was really great. The action was like a 10 out of 10. But due to the character behaviors, and I really like the Dragon King, I just really like the way the sets look, the costumes look, everything. I like how everything looks, and I like how they're building up most of these characters. But I thought this was a poor excuse to have Courtney defeated by Sydney. And I felt like Sydney really needs some redeemable qualities, some kind of side that shows some humanity to make her a bit more realistic. While also, at the same time, we need to stop we don't need any more bipolar stuff from Courtney, where she learned her lesson, and then guess what? We've reset. She didn't learn anything. She thinks she can handle it all on her own. Let's stop that with the next episode. So 6 out of 10 due to the behaviors of the primary characters that this episode heavily focused on. I'd give it a 6 out of 10. The action, like I said, was a 10 out of 10 easily, or at least a 9 out of 10. I'd say a 9 out of 10 easily, but I'd give the action on its own a 10 out of 10. But let me know what you thought of it, your thoughts and opinions below, and can somebody confirm for me if that's supposed to be Shining Knight or not. I don't really know, because I don't really go around trying to dig into spoilers and learning too much. I don't like to ruin things for myself when it comes to watching shows, so I don't try to get into what's coming, what I do speculate, that I'm not going to go out and look for spoilers to ruin things for myself. 6 out of 10, like, subscribe, share. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on everything in this episode. What did you like? What didn't you like? Do you feel like I do about Sydney needing some redeemable qualities, and that Courtney's behavior between the last scene of last episode and this one, yeah, it just seems inconsistent. But 6 out of 10. Stay awesome. Stay good one here. Eventually we will. Like, subscribe, share. Stay awesome. Rock on.